Sugod na ta!
Good day. Today, we're going to discuss about DNS and DHCP and how they work. We all knew that devices connected in the network identify themselves and communicate with each other using IP addresses. So each device has an assigned distinct IP address. And we also know that devices do not understand human language. For example, when we type a website like www.facebook.com on our web server, how will the network identify which website would be launched or on what server it must communicate? So, this is where the DNS comes in. So, what is DNS? So, DNS stands for Domain Name System. DNS stands like a translator between the device and human. The DNS holds the records of IP addresses with its corresponding domain names. DNS is analogous to phone book, which contains the contact names with the corresponding contact numbers. So the function of the DNS is to convert the website name into its equivalent IP address and vice versa. For example, if we type the corresponding IP address of facebook.com on a web browser, so as you can see, the IP address is directed or redirected into the Facebook domain. Now, what is DNS server? So DNS server is a device in which it contains files needed for the domain, such as HTML, photos, and audios. Now the question is the DNS server necessarily needed? So actually, if we knew the IP address of the domain, we do not need a DNS server. But however, as the number of domains increases, thus the number of IP addresses needed to be memorized also increases. And the human brain can easier memorize names rather than a combination of numbers. Now, what is DHCP? DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. There are two types of assigning an IP address on a device. First is a manual configuration, and second is an automatic configuration. The automatic IP configuration is known as the DHCP. So what is a DHCP server? So DHCP server is a device in which it secures that all devices in a network was assigned with a distinct and unique IP address. Our routers have an embedded DHCP system so that when we connect our devices, it can have an assigned IP address which is needed so that they can communicate with other devices on a network. So how to set up DNS and DHCP server? So in this presentation, we will be using Windows Server, which will be run on virtual machine. We have here our two virtual machines. We have your server and we have your client. So first, let us configure the server. So let's log into the server. Okay. We have now service login. So let's wait for the server manager to boot up. So let us configure this local server. So if you need to change your name, your computer name, so change it. So after changing your computer name, next is to configure your IP as a static IP so that your domain will not change its IP address. Because if it does, it can lead to serious problem or the server cannot be located. So for presentation purposes, let's just copy the details of our internet and configure it in the IPv4 as a static IP address. Okay. Let's see the details. Let's just copy the details. Then let's change the IPv4 configuration. So let's create a static IP. Then, okay. And close. So let's go back to our dashboard. Then let's add roles. So let's add roles of DNS and DHCP server. Next. Next. Then next to DNS. So now we have added our DHCP server and DNS server. So click next. Next. Let's wait for the installation to finish. Okay, the installation is now completed. Let us now complete the DHCP configuration. So complete DHCP configuration. Then commit. Let us configure your Active Directory so that we can create a domain. So we must add or create a new FORES for our server. Then let's make a domain name for our server. You can use any domain names for your server, but do not use a domain name which is activated or in the network of the internet, just like google.com, facebook.com, or etc. 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 We will name our root main domain as computer networks or computer network dot local. Next, you must create a password for your directory. So let's create a password. Click next. So next, be your NetBIOS domain name, computer network. Next. Next. After that, click install. Let us wait for the installation to finish. So our device now is restarting. So this is to save the changes that we have on our server. So let's just wait for the server to boot up. While waiting for our server to boot up, let us go to your client's PC details. So let's open your client's PC. So let's see the details of your client's PC. CMD phone. Let us know the details of this PC. So IP config. So the client PC has an IP address of 192.168.254.113. Then we have your default gateway of 192.168.245.2. So let's copy that. Also, let's see what is the host name of this computer. So type host name. So the host name is client PC1. Next, let us now continue to configure your DHCP. So DHCP, from your tools, click DHCP. So under your computer admin, so from your IPv4, let's create new scope. So next. So let's say this would be your LAN A. This will be the scope. So let us give the range of your IP addresses. So that will be 192.168.245. Let's say we start from .50 up to .150. 192.168.245.150. So click next. Next. So we have to configure your default gateway. So that is 192.168.245.2. So add your default gateway. So next. So your DNS server domain name is computer network .local. So click next. Next. And activate the scope. Click yes. Now under your scope, so this will be your address pool. So your address pool is from .50 to .150. Now let's try to test if it has a connectivity between your client and your server. So let's ping your server, ping 192.168.245.2. So we have a reply. So next is to add your client's PC into the domain. So from your start button, click system. Then change settings. Then change. Then let us connect it to the domain. So our domain is computer network .local. Click OK. So let's input the admin password. So the account, that will be administrator. Then connect. Okay. So let's start the computer. Then let's start. Let's restart the computer. Now let us test the connectivity between your client's PC and your server using the domain name. So let's ping the host name of your computer server, which is computer admin. So ping computer admin. Click enter. Then it is now replying. So as you can see, that computer admin.computernetwork.local is the domain name of your server, and the 192.168.245.2 is the IP address of your server. So that's how DNS server works. Thank you.